So the Roman political system, it bred harder, stronger, faster, smarter individuals. And we got to do all that to get to the Iron Age.
Yeah.
And we come back to this issue of being harder, right, and being stronger. You know, we harness that fire and we start to work metals, and we move into bronze, and then we move into iron. And I think the Roman Empire is a great model for the way that human beings interact with technology and the way that they interact with a competitive world, and become both anti-fragile and get harder, smarter, faster, and stronger. And this same thing was going on in other parts of the world, but I'll focus upon Romans for a bit. You go read Livy's History of Rome, and he writes about the Roman Republic had 700 good years, 700 years before it even went to empire. And we start with this idea of Roman politics. You've heard the phrase, beware the Ides of March. Mm-hmm. And it refers to Julius Caesar. And, people think of it as oh, well, that's when someone's going to kill Caesar. But it's really referring to the fact that for 700 years, the Romans got together on March 15th and had an election every year. The Romans were the most organized of all of the civilizations we can find in the ancient world, and that's how they grew to dominate. They were just organized, and one of their forms of organization is, and this is a thing of beauty, they're running a process where every year, March 15th, they have their election. They appoint 2 consuls. They appoint all their officers. The consuls then, they conduct about 2 weeks worth of religious ceremonies. They all worship, they appease the gods, they're getting psyched up, right? They're reminding themselves that they're unique. They're celebrating. Simultaneously, they raise an army. They train the army. We go from March 15th all the way through to May 1st, 6 weeks. In those 6 weeks, they get organized, celebrate, get excited, wait for a good omen, and they're really getting ready. And then the campaigning season starts, May 1st. Everybody that knows anything about Europe and the Mediterranean knows the weather gets good on May 1st. The problem before May 1st, it rains, there's storms. If you set out to sea or you set out across terrain before that time period, if the cold doesn't get you, the storm's going to get you, or your ship's going to sink or something. It's, ultimately, right, in the history of all these wars, more people die from natural causes than they die from bullets of the enemy or from the enemy. So the number one danger is nature's going to kill you. So right. The Romans basically did summer campaignings. And so May 1st, they start the campaign. That goes through June, July, August, September, all good months. If they're still fighting something, maybe around October, they wrap it up. They go into winter quarters by November. November, December, January, maybe they have half of November, but certainly December, January, February, that's winter. They're not doing anything because the elements are a much bigger threat than the enemy is. and if you know anything about the Med, you can't navigate the Med in the winter. Like even in the modern day, it's no one would want to go yachting in the Med in the winter. It's just not comfortable. You get storms. Weather is very uncertain. So all this time they're resting, they're recuperating, they're regrouping, they're politicking. You can imagine. They're discussing with each other who's most suited That guy's long in the tooth. That guy's lost a step. This is the up and comer. You support me, I'll support you. They're working through that consensus back in Rome, and they're remembering what it's like to be a Roman. And then along comes March, and then they decide who's going to do what, and everybody gets you're going to be a tribune, you're going to be a consul, you're going to be a governor. Let's put in place the administration, and they're always rotating, and they go and they do it again. And if they send off the best and the brightest, and the guy takes an arrow in the back and he dies, well, next year there's another guy. Scipio Africanus, like one of the most famous Roman generals of all time, he rose to power, in his early 20s after all of his uncle and his father died in the Second Punic War. His entire family was getting wiped out, but there's always another Roman. Always another Roman, always another one, from a very early age. And so the political system had a certain elegance to it. Because it was tied to the calendar. It was tied to nature. It was a natural cycle, and it took into account the need of human beings to celebrate each other's successes. I go campaign, I come back, I get a triumph. It took into account their need to have a common faith. The faith is critical. If we're not all Romans, and if we don't all believe the same thing, why are we going to die for each other?
Right.
Faith mattered. But the weather mattered.
Yeah, right.
And it's like people don't realize they did it every year on March 15th because if I told you the weather's going to get good on May 1st and you need an army, when would you start?
Right.
They're pretty smart. Yeah. 700 years of it. That's the Roman way. And then they also took into account human motivation, which is everybody's got an ego. Everybody needs their turn. Nobody can hog all the power. So even if you were the greatest general this year, you got to give it up to someone else next year. And as long as they kept turning up, and if I'm the second most powerful family and you're from the most powerful family, maybe I'll support you for consul with an understanding that it's my turn next year.
Right.
And it's like and then maybe my family will fight and die for you because we have a chance at glory next year. But at the point where you take over and you tell me, well, you think you're going to just keep the job for the next 62 years. At that point, the fabric of the civilization starts to break down because that equity and that citizenship and that sense that we're protecting the Roman way of life starts to degrade to we're just helping somebody's dynasty screw them.
Right. So it's the dynamism of the hierarchy keeps it revivified and fresh, and they're harmonized with nature. That's very interesting.
Anti-fragile.
Right.
The Romans are anti-fragile. They're always going off to fight. Always, always, always. It's just the history of war after war after war after war. But they've got this, like a typical CEO, right? You could be in a job 10 years, 20 years. I'm 55. I've been in my job for quite a while. But it's not uncommon for someone in modern day America to be doing a job and become CEO somewhere between age 40 and age 65. Not uncommon. In fact, the captain of a yacht will oftentimes be 40 and they'll stay as captain until they're 65. You might do the same job for 20 years, 25 years. I once took a tour of the U.S. military, and I was treated like a senator. And so it was an orientation tour. And they would take you to Army base, a Navy base, an Air Force base, a Marine base, Camp Lejeune, Fort Hood, etc. And one of the things they did is they took us onto an aircraft carrier, the John Stennis. And so I landed on an aircraft carrier, and then I got to tour the carrier, and then I got to meet the captain. The average age of the soldiers on the aircraft carrier is 19. Average age, 5,000 people in the aircraft carrier, 19. The officers are in their 20s, some in their early 30s. Do you know who the oldest man or woman on the carrier, Robert? The oldest?
No idea.
Old man? The old man is 41.
Wow.
So I started talking to him, and the number two is 38. If you're the number two head of operations, it's an 18-month gig, and if you're the captain, it might be 36 months. And so I started talking, and this is a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. These guys can start a war. They start a war.
Oh.
Like it's like 1/12 of the firepower of the U.S. Navy.
Right.
You could take down all but like 3 countries in a heart. Maybe you could take down any country in a heartbeat. It's a pretty important job, Robert.
Right.
Wouldn't you say? Right.
Absolutely.
So I said to him, "So tell me your path to get here." And he goes, "Well, I went to the Naval Academy, and I did this for a few years, and every 1 to 3 years, I moved to a different command, and I finally made it as a XO number 2 officer like 2 years ago, and I got promoted 6 months ago, and I'll have this command for like 24 months or something." And I said, "Well, let me get this. So there's only like 12 of you, right? So you're one of the top 12 most talented officers in the entire Navy. Like, how many people in the Navy? Hundreds of thousands of people in the military. This is one of the 12 most important jobs in the United States military, bar none." I'm like, "So in like 12 more months, you're leaving?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm leaving." I said, "Well, why wouldn't they want you to do this job for 20 years? Like, you could start World War III. I mean, like, why would you take the risk of like changing and putting someone else in the job? What if they screw it up? Like, we don't do it, but Robert, we don't do that in any other part of our economy. We don't actually put 40-year-olds with term limits of 36 months in charge of cities, states, countries, companies. We don't even put them in charge of yachts. If you had a 100-foot pleasure craft, you wouldn't do it. You'd be like, "I find one captain, I'm keeping the guy for 20 years. I'm not changing." You wouldn't actually do that with a person that like cooks your food or mows your lawn. So why do you think this guy's got to go after 36 months? Any guesses? Because the answer is going to blow your mind.
What jumps to mind is if he were to get paid off or corrupted or something, but I really don't know.
That's not a bad idea. It's like, that's like the forest ranger principle. It's like we rotate the forest rangers in order to keep anybody from bribing or corrupting a forest ranger so they don't misuse public national park resources. Brilliant idea, right? Bedrock of the Forestry Service and a great anti-corruption technique, but that's not why. I'm standing on the deck of this aircraft carrier talking to this guy who a lot of people would think like he's just a junior executive. Maybe we're ready to give him a whatever. And I said, "So tell me again why you got to leave this job, even though you're the best guy in the Navy to do it. You're obviously hyper talented." He goes, "Well, Michael, there's a lot of really, really good people coming out of the academy every year, and everybody needs their turn." Everybody needs their turn. He's talking about a 21-year-old lieutenant coming out of the Naval Academy saying, these people signed up to commit their life and their career and potentially sacrifice their life to be a Navy officer. And at the pinnacle is their hope that they can be the captain and have their own command. And at the pinnacle of that is captain of an aircraft carrier. And if you want people to love and fight and die and cherish your institution, you got to get out of the way and give them their chance. I mean, everybody needs their turn. And you start thinking, maybe we overestimate ourselves, right? This is why, again, a decentralized organism like Bitcoin is superior to a company because, as Charles de Gaulle said, right, graveyards are full of the tombstones of indispensable men.
Right. Yeah.
Right? It's like...
This makes me think too, 100%. This makes me think too, as a kid, there was this notion that anyone, I grew up in Tennessee, but anyone could be president. Anyone could be the American president. Not now, that may be kind of silly and not actually the case, but that notion seemed to give people, at least kids, this motivation to really want to be patriotic and part and parcel for their country. So it seems like something about the possibility of achieving the highest level within an organism or organization sort of gives people maximal motivation or something like that.
There was a time, like, there's a certain pride in being a naval officer if you believe when the head of a carrier looks at you when you're starting your career and says, one day you'll have your turn at this. Yeah. You and I are comrades. You're as good as me. You're the future of the Navy. Right. That's what will cause people to lay down and die for you, right? That's
inspiration. Absolutely.
That respect.
Yeah.
And that's what the Romans had in those 700 years, the height of the Republic. It's, you're a Roman first. This year, maybe you're under the command of, your family's number one adversary. But next year, that'll be your command, right? And that's the Roman way. And there's a certain submission to nature and to the will. The organism is greater than any one individual, any one family. And it's continually refreshing itself. We have to have a constant flow of new talent, new leadership. Someone drops the baton, someone else picks up the baton. That's what made the Romans great. They suffered no kings among them.
Right.
You look at the Second Punic War, and then I think maybe it was the Second Macedonian War. Eventually, the Romans went to fight against, Philip of Macedon. He was a king, and he had an awful son, and his one son got fighting with his other son and convinced the father to murder the second son. And then the father realized that he'd made a mistake because his first son lied to him. And the father was a nutcase, crazy guy, and the son was kind of crazy, and it corrupted the entire society. And the Roman consul was just the most talented general, and he knew that, the way it worked is his officers were from every other competing family in Rome. If that general was lazy, drunk, cowardly, or stupid, it got reported back by the officer corps to Rome and to the Senate. And so they were slightly gossipy. But the point is, when you know that everybody's watching you and that you can be replaced and will be replaced next year and your future is uncertain, it brings out a higher degree of professionalism. And that's the competition in the market. Just like, you're a miner and they cut off your electricity while your mining rig stops and the mining shifts somewhere else.
Absolutely. That's the reason entrepreneurs in the free market are accountable to the preferences of their customers, right? Because they constantly face the existential threat of customers going elsewhere. Whereas the opposite would be true in a monopoly, right? The monopolist doesn't have to give two shits about his customers' preferences because they have no other choice. So I think that's really interesting.
So the Roman political system, it bred harder, stronger, faster, smarter individuals. And it was no apologies about it. From age 3, this is the way it is. and Rome comes first, and everybody else's interests are subjugated. And when you look at that, right, they started with that system, a good system. I mean, people forget about it. 700 years as a republic. I mean, find me another republic lasted 700 years, conquered the entire known world. Then you've got the Roman army, and that tells a different story. I mean, the Roman army it takes us back to this issue of there was never such thing as a fair fight. The Romans weren't fighting fair. They would have laughed at you, you know, like the Roman approach to this was to take, my illustration of the slinger on the cliff and take it to a whole new level.